Studies of Queen Mary University of London, in particular by the Alumni Association from 4 different countries, which are Indonesia, Nigeria, Switzerland, and Turkey. And the topic, as you all know today, is very fascinating and it's very interesting one. And I cannot wait to listen more from the panel that we are going to have today from all the speakers. The topic is the role of the internet governance in geopolitical conflicts, economy and energy crisis, climate change from a global, regional, national, comparative perspective. And also in this webinar, will consist of several sessions. The session will be started and opening by me as the host, of course, as we are doing now. And then we're going to have the moderator, Mr. Jose Tison Mirza, and which allowed him to walk through everybody to the, very fruitful and very interesting discussions to all the speakers. And then after that, each speakers, they will have about 20 minutes to elaborate and discuss and even debating in some topics that literally happens in their regions. And then after that, we will hand it to the Q&A sessions, which is all our attendees can, please feel free to ask any questions and try to take benefits from these 2 hours as much as you can. With further ado, I will continue by introducing, our moderator for this event, Mr. Jose Kaiser Tison Mirza, and he's an alumnus of CCLS of Queen Mary University of London with an LLM in Computer and Communications, law graduating in 2013. Jose actually currently acts as a senior privacy counsel at the Global Marketplace and an e-commerce website, of course, for eBay, handling matters including commercial compliance, product and litigations. Prior to this, Jose spent 2 years as global privacy legal team, providing legal support to a wide range of different businesses, including the advertising, marketing, and trading teams. And Jose also a qualified solicitor in England and Wales, and he's holding the CIPP/E and CIPM Privacy Professional certifications. So not to waste your times and the times for the attendees as well, please enjoy the panelists and the speakers. Jose, the whole panel is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, Pajari. And first of all, we've got a few housekeeping topics to cover. So on behalf of the Centre for Commercial Law Studies at Queen Mary University of London and the organiser and steering committee for this event, we'd like to express our gratitude by thanking the numerous contributors, including our very distinguished guest speakers. Now, you may find I have the most wonderful way of pronouncing all of your names, so even if it's not entirely accurate, please forgive me. So we have Dr. Jovan Kobalia from the Diplo Foundation and Geneva Internet Platform, Dr. Fazaneh Badeye from Digital Medusa, Mr. Firdausi Firdaus from the University of Barcelona, Mr. Temitope Lawal from the Bond University and NCC, and finally, Dr. Sezen Kama Ishik from the Medeniyet University, who will be joining us later on during the event. Thank you all for being open to sharing your knowledge, views, and experiences with us today. We'd also like to thank Miss Pajari Kunchaimang from Charoen Pokpan Group as the host, and Ms. Zoe Scholes, Ms. Catherine Taylor-Bennett, and Ms. Celia Blakeway Phillips from the CCLS Alumni and Development Team in London for technical and promotional assistance. We would like to thank the following individuals as well at the CCLS Committee Indonesia chapter for their valuable contributions behind the scenes. This includes Mr. Firdausi Firdaus as the initiator and project lead. Those of you with sharp minds may have noticed that Mr. Firdaus is also a speaker today. Mrs. Aisha Alamanda for her assistance with content and materials. And finally, Mr. Mohammed Iqbal Pratama for the eFlyer and Zoom backgrounds, which you can see beautifully displayed behind us all. We would like to thank Mr. Salfikar Al-Farizi Abbas from the Ministry of Communications and Informatics Indonesia for assistance with content and materials, as well as providing his valuable guidance. We'd also like to provide our sincere gratitude to Adebisi Sanada from the CCLS Committee Nigeria chapter, Dr. Christian Schonfeld from the CCLS Committee Switzerland chapter, and Nisanur Hekimoglu from the CCLS Committee Turkey, each for sourcing a group of fascinating speakers for this event and for providing promotional assistance. Last but not least, I think it's important to note that we appreciate all of you who are watching, all you attendees who have joined. As is often said, the more the merrier. Now we're done with the niceties, and again, forgive me if I mispronounced any names. We can move on to the topic at hand. So over the last half century, the internet has become a fundamental tool at humanity's disposal. The ability to instantly transmit data in its many forms on a global scale has had a great effect on our ability to contest the challenges we face as the human race. But as Newton so aptly put, every action in nature has an equal and opposite reaction. We now face original and unique challenges which have appeared also on a global scale, whether these be in the form of escalating global conflicts, global inflationary pressures, the dawning of the new energy crisis, the global COVID pandemic, and most importantly, climate change, most definitely the defining crisis of our time, and poses a major threat to international peace and security. Can internet governance as a global tool be used as part of the solution to these challenges? As we've already seen, and is happening right now in Ukraine, in Iran, during the COVID pandemic, and as part of the ongoing climate change crisis, the internet has been used as an instrument of education and assistance, but also misinformation and harm. We hope that this event can be seen as our contribution of the former as opposed to the latter. So without further ado, we'll begin this session with our first speaker, Dr. Jovan Kobalia. Dr. Kobalia is the founding director of the Diplo Foundation and the head of the Geneva Internet Platform. A former diplomat, Dr. Kobalia has a professional and academic background in international law, diplomacy, and information technology. He has been a pioneer in the field of cyber diplomacy since 1992, when he established the Unit for Information Technology and Diplomacy at the Mediterranean Academy of Diplomatic Studies in Malta. Dr. Kobalia was a member of the United Nations Working Group on Internet Governance from 2004 to 2005, special advisor to the chairman of the UN Internet Governance Forum from 2006 to 2010, and a member of the high-level multi-stakeholder committee for Net Mondial from 2013 to 14. In 2018 to 19, he served as co-executive director of the Secretariat of the United Nations High-Level Panel on Digital Cooperation. Dr. Kobalia lectures on e-diplomacy, digital policy, and internet governance in academic and training institutions in many countries, including Austria, Belgium, Switzerland, Malta, and the United States. He'll be speaking about global internet governance, an overview from Geneva. And please note that Dr. Kobalia, apologies, will have time to take questions at the very end of the event. So Dr. Kobalia, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Jose, in particular for pronouncing correctly my last name, which is difficult. And it's really great to be today here. Congratulations for all colleagues who made this event possible, and for giving us a chance to increase awareness on digital governance and internet governance. And I will delve into the terminological dilemmas very, very shortly. The time is critical, and we should be proud of one aspect, which is always overlooked. Today, many global infrastructures are basically crumbling or disappearing or getting disintegrating. You have decoupling, supply chains are reduced, there are more and more borders on flow of people, money, goods. One infrastructure which is still to the large extent interconnected on different levels is the internet. People still can send email from Moscow to Kiev, or Kiev to Moscow, or along the old borders device that exist in the modern world. They may not be able to access all web services, as we know, with the filtering and the censorship, but still internet as a global infrastructure is functioning. This is the background for my, or a canvas for my talk today, how to what are the challenges of the current internet digital governance, and how we should ensure that it remains interconnected, because it is a global commons, it is a global public good, and we should invest all of our intellectual, policy, individual energies to keep it as it is. I always say this is grandma geopolitics, because grandmas across the continents with dispersed families, with migration, often connect with their grandchildren over Skype, over Zoom, over Viber, over WhatsApp. Now, it's not just a matter of the high geopolitics at the G7 or WEF or the other things. It is a concern of all individuals and families to keep them together. Therefore, that's first concept that I would like to forward, the concept of grandma digital geopolitics. But let me now dive deeper with a few slides, which I'm going to share with you on that could support visually my intervention. And here is you will tell me if you can see the slide. Jose, yes? No, good. Okay, I would like to frame my discussion with my favorite image, which I call it wandering or wandering birds. The question of challenging everything, including counterintuitive thinking. We are at the turning point. The many structures of modern society are questioned, including some real pillars like territorial integrity since Westphalia, to the basis of international law, open sea, and many pillars of modern international order. Now, we should be counterintuitive and be like these birds, we should start wandering and wandering. But what is this discussion about? It is about simple question. Whom we call when we have a digital problem? When we are as a citizens, as a country, as a community, attacked, when our video is removed from YouTube, which happened to a friend of mine who based his business on it, when we cannot access email, is there anyone whom we call? Now the first answer is no. There is no single phone call which you can call on national, regional, and global level to help you with digital issues. This is bad news. Good news is that there are thousands of mechanisms, and you need a really expertise to navigate. If you are attacked, whom to call, who can help you, if you need your services to be restored on YouTube, or I can make the list. We made the list of typical questions. It goes to 150 possible questions that you can ask somebody to help you with. Therefore, that's all the system of telephone connections doesn't work. We are making phone calls and nobody's answering. And it brings me back to the next question of our discussion. Who should answer it? Is it the internet governance, digital governance system? And this is the first strong message that I would like to convey. Don't be confused with the description of it. Why it is important. In internet governance circle, you have hours and hours, days and days of meeting discussing, is it internet governance or is it digital governance or is it cyber governance, meta governance, virtual governance? Always ask the question what it is about. Is it about managing critical infrastructure? Is it about cybersecurity? Now, it is a new field, and those of you who are starting your academic career, be careful about this trap. Yes, we use different terms, and very often academics, when they want to write a new book, they invent new term, obviously. If there are 10 books on internet governance, why you should write 11? But if you put it as a meta governance or virtual governance, it may be a new book. Therefore, be careful about this terminological confusion. We will use internet governance today for a very simple reason. Everything that is happening on digital world currently, which is of importance, is running on the so-called protocol TCP/IP, Transport Control Protocol, Internet Protocol, including blockchain. Everything is running on it. And this is what defines internet, this basic protocol, packet switching network protocol. Why we are discussing today? We are discussing digital governance and related topics at a very important moment in the history, where we are basically redefining a new social contract. This is indicated in the report of Secretary General, Our Common Agenda, and he calls communities from the local communities, nations, the global communities to redefine social contract. Now, social contract is not going to be signed on dotted lines. Here we visualize how it would work, but it is basically global understanding, what matters to us, what are the key values that we would like to protect on the global level, on the regional, national, and the local level. Societies worldwide have been negotiating social contracts since time immemorial. The major negotiations happened between 8th century BC and Anno Domini, when you have Confucianism, Buddhism, Christianity, ancient philosophy, basically putting humans in the center of the governance of society. Now it sounds it's very modern terms, but if you really unpack the major religious philosophical concepts that emerged in that period, so-called axial period, as German philosopher Karl Jasper called it, this is more or less that. And we are still running on that operating system. Now, are we revisiting this operating system to define new social contract or not? This is a big question. I'm giving you just this broader canvas to understand when we move to specificities on internet governance, why all of these broader issues are related to specific internet governance. Now, here is the Karl Jasper call of axial period. Then we had the Enlightenment period, where basically Rousseau, Voltaire, and other thinkers put rationality in the center. And we have 5 Vienna thinkers, Freud, Schumpeter, von Mises, Hayek, and Wittgenstein, who basically put more or less thinking basis for our society. Now, why it is important? When we discuss privacy, freedom of expression, trust, we should be aware how we came to this concept, and they have this history from approximately 800 BC till today, via Enlightenment, Vienna thinkers, and digital axial period. Important aspect of this is that most of those concepts were developed especially in the last 200-300 years, in the Western thinking systems. Before that, you have Confucianism, Islam, Zoroastrianism, different religious and conceptual tradition. I have to mention it because of Farzaneh. That's important, but that's true. We have all of these traditions that informed somehow, but after Enlightenment, it became mainly Eurocentric thinking about the future. Now, what is the current geopolitical context? I always bring this shocking parallel just to locate our discussion, that Apple's market capitalization at the end of 2021 was higher than combined GDP of African continent, which was $2.4 trillion US. We can discuss market capitalization and GDP, it can be compared, but just to have the bearings, what we are discussing, enormous power of the tech companies. And this, all the theories that economic power tends to evolve into political power. Therefore, we have more and more tech companies moving into political space and trying to discuss privacy, to discuss who should govern the internet and cybersecurity and other issues. Another important aspect of digital geopolitics is the cable infrastructure. 95% of intercontinental traffic is carried by seabed cables. It is shifting with the Belt and Road Initiative to over continental between China, Mongolia, Russia, and Europe, to those overland cables. Now, one issue which is completely understudied and under-discussed is vulnerability of these cables. 5 countries in the world, China, United States, France, UK, and Russia, have capability, small submarines, to cut any submarine cable. We're speaking about enormous risks for the global infrastructure if these cables are cut. And there was one very dangerous precedent. This is explosion on the Nord Stream gas pipeline which happen beyond territorial waters in open sea. Throughout the history, this is the oldest concept in international law. For those of you who are lawyers, it's a concept of Hugo Grotius, Dutch international lawyer, who argued for the open sea and free navigation, including seabed. For the first time, seriously, there was this explosion on the Nord Stream is basically the hint that even open sea is not anymore secure, and it can be, cables can be cut, gas pipelines and other things. Enormous issue to be discussed by internet governance community. Here are a few places where most of these cables are basically coming together. Most of Latin America connects to the internet via literally one building next to Miami Airport. Most of Euro-Asian continent communication is going between Alexandria and Suez. Most of the Asian communication toward Japan, Indonesia, Australia is going via Malacca Strait next to Singapore. Therefore, there is a huge vulnerability of the basic internet infrastructure that we should be aware of. Now, let me get back to this discussion about social contract. UN Secretary General proposed our common agenda. My colleague Katerina can share the few links that you can follow. We have the websites where we are following developments on these issues. And the key question is who is going to answer phone calls. On other illustration, all of these issues are presented in the building under construction. It's internet governance building, from infrastructural issues to cybersecurity, legal, development, economic, socio-cultural, and human rights issues. More than 50 digital issues that are basically constitute internet governance or digital governance, name it, call it whatever you want. Usually cybersecurity community, which is very proud of their work, they got annoyed when I put cybersecurity under internet governance. They say, no, this is a special issue. It cannot be internet governance, but I will spare you of this, to the large extent, useless debates. What are some issues from this building that we should be aware of? It's data flows, the question of dominance of tech companies, regulation versus innovation, e-commerce and development, artificial intelligence, automation, future work, blockchain, fintech, inclusive finance, cybersecurity, digital identities. Those are, let's say, 7 set of issues out of this building with 52 different issues. One of underlying issue is the question of our competition with machines. It's a battle we put it graphically, our illustrator, between machine and us for the mainly around artificial intelligence. In this discussion, there are many confusions. One of biggest confusion is between tech community and policy community, because they connect A and B in different ways. Tech people connect it with a straight line. Diplomats, policy communities, as you can see, have many turns, from fear to please the boss to confusion, and you can name it. What are these issues? One underlying issue is the question of domain name structure of the phone book in this case, which basically translates the domain name into IP number. It is run by Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, and they're basically keeping hold of this address book. Now, terminology around this is so confusing. I once tested myself 3 minutes using the acronyms from the ICANN community, TCP/IP, DNS. You can list, but in essence, in its core, is basically management of the simple address book that translates names into numbers. That's sort of a gist of the function of ICANN. Then you have very interesting and crucial issue for digital governance, which created a lot of confusion. You have basically us, internet users, sharing our data with the internet companies for free services. They're not free. We don't pay for them financially, but we pay with our data, as we are aware now of this. This is historical. I drew it 10 years ago and used. Now it's common point. We know it, but it was used to raise awareness that it's not free when you use Google and Facebook and other services. Obviously, they collect our data, they share with vendors, vendors buy us, sell us services and goods, and we pay with the money. The problem is that most of the legal regulation is on the side of transaction, goods, services, money. The other field was more or less unregulated. Now there are GDPR, there are now attempts to regulate consumer protection. But this is one of the major challenges in the current internet model. The second model, this model is called in Silicon Valley toxic model, like tobacco industry. They're trying to run away because more and more countries are trying to control use of data. Therefore, what they're doing massively, they're running into artificial intelligence model, where you sell something. You sell Tesla car, you sell Fitbit, you sell a refrigerator, but that device has to provide data in order to improve the quality of that device. Therefore, the legal regulatory challenge is much higher. It's not anymore use data for sake of data, like here in order to provide behavior profiling. It is for your product. You buy Tesla car, of course, we need your data to make it in this continuous circle better and more powerful. Therefore, this is now where the regulatory battle is happening. How to regulate AI and what you can regulate and what you cannot regulate. One of the issues in this context is data governance, which, as you can see, is a complex. It has technology standardization, economy, security, law, and human rights aspect. And now here I will come to Geneva. I'm basically, maybe this around my building, you can draw the circle of 3 kilometers in radius, and you can find most of organizations which deal with different aspects of this, whatever, flower, butterfly, whatever you call it. You have standardization organization, IETF, ISO, ITU, who deal with the standards and technology. You have World Trade Organization, which deals with e-commerce. The key issue is data flows. They now have plurilateral negotiations. You have quite a few security organizations who deal with protection of the data. And you have human rights and the law organization, including Human Rights Council, who deal with privacy protection and other issues. Confusion is huge. Left hand doesn't know what right hand is doing on the level of organizations, missions, and the other issues. And it is going to be probably one of the major challenges of data governance. How to connect standards to economy and other issues. Another big issue, especially in times of conflict and misuse of the social media, is the question of fake news. And question of distinction between disinformation, misinformation, and the other issues. It's very slippery, it's a highly slippery slope, because you can easily cross the line between justified filtering and censorship. For a long time, Western democracies were trying to keep management of information out of the internet governance. They say, in cybersecurity, we protect cables, infrastructure, but we don't deal with information. While, for example, China and Russia were arguing, no, security is also information security. We have to deal with information. Now with the fake news, this distinction got highly confused and very, very critical. As you know, you mentioned a few examples in introduction, Jose. Many countries who filter, they use easily the question of fight against terrorism, social stability, and I think they use to the large extent copy and paste of arguments that are typically used. And this is very probably, together with data and AI, this is probably going to be one of the most delicate issues to manage, to deal with the disinformation, misinformation, while basically keeping freedom of information.
I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Dr. Kobalia, but we're coming towards the end of our allotted time here.
I'm finishing in just a few slides. Here is that we have to deal with the security, economic, and human rights question as another important triangle. If you have a time, join us virtually or in vivo at the Digital Diplomacy Summit in Malta, and keep wondering and wondering. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cobbalia. I believe I've been corrected that you won't be able to stay until our Q&A session at the very end, so you'll be able to take any questions now. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, I have another presentation for the group of African diplomats. I have to rush literally to the...
Oh, well, we're very lucky that you've been able to attend today's session.
My pleasure. And I'm sure I'll miss a lot because you have an excellent lineup of stuff.
Yeah, we have a brilliant lineup today. If any attendees want to use the Q&A tool on Zoom to ask any questions, please feel free. Otherwise, I'm open to opening up the floor to other panelists in case they have any questions they'd like to pose to Dr. Cobbalia.
If you have any question of the wandering birds, I'm ready to answer. I have a group of about 100 people, from taxi drivers to Nobel Prize winners who are part of this community of wandering birds. Therefore, you're welcome. Drop me an email if you want to become part of the there is no statute, there is no structure, there is no membership fee. It is just readiness to wander.
I have one question. How do you view the current progress of internet governance as we see the development, let's say, of European legislature? Right now, Biden has announced the AI governance initiative. Do you believe we're moving to a better place, or do you think countries are being too focused on the national level as opposed to uniting on a global level?
Yeah, definitely we will we'll have decoupling of the internet and we'll have disintegration of the internet. Therefore the situation will get worse before it gets better. That was clear message also from recent World Trade Organization forum here in Geneva. Everybody is speaking about decoupling, of the onshoring, of moving industry back to home. And you know how it works in psychology. Once starts speaking, there is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, people start, it starts happening. Because only a few years ago, it was unthinkable to have sovereignty over the supply chains or chains of digital system. It will probably get worse before it gets better. Now, the real pushback, and I think it will be an important moment, is when grandma geopolitics starts kicking back. Because if you start disintegrating internet, one day people will realize that they cannot do what they got used to do. To speak to their cousins across the ocean, or to do e-commerce, or to book a flight, or to do other things. Therefore, many societies worldwide, my estimate, next to 2-3 years, will have to do basically serious soul searching and to decide what is the ideal trade-off. Because the interconnected world brings many benefits: economic, social, cultural, family. While there are serious questions on data protection, data localization, economic models. Therefore, it will get, over the next year to 2 years, I guess it will get worse. And I think it will ultimately get better after the society will realize what is trade-off. And it will be more informed decision, because currently we have a lot of just hot narratives, hot talk. Oh, we should be connected. Multi-stakeholder is important, which is inclusion. But I believe more than it is realized bottom-up by society, it will be much more powerful and solid. Currently, this is the narrative which has been going for decades, and people continue basically repeating, but it is slightly disconnected from society. And when society realizes it, that could be powerful, much more solid basis. That's basically my take on it.
That's very fascinating. And I think it's important that you've noted the power is not just in the legislature's hands, but it's really in our hands as a social tool, really. But thank you so much, Dr. Cobbalia. Sure. Thanks so much for your fascinating talk. I'll be moving on to ask.
I want to ask.
Oh, you have a question? Sure, Elsie, yeah, feel free.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jovan Cobbalia, for your time. I want to ask, can you measure about how internet governance has contributed to make the penetration culture or culture imperialism in in the society where it's not part of Western society, because as we know that the internet has developed in the Western society. So there is a bit of environment where people who are not part of this Western culture is being forced to accept it. Well, I think maybe there is no agenda, but maybe there is agenda, but I just want to know that what is the role of internet governance so far in this case? Because I think a few years ago, I think before COVID, when I went to Paris Internet Governance Forum, they have a session who are talking about the cultural and also but the language perspective, because as we know that the internet language is very dominant with English, yeah, which also contribute with the extinction of language, but culture is not only language. So there are many things about this, about ideology, about lifestyle, blah, 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 blah. So I don't know, maybe this, because you're like Suhu Guru in this issue. So maybe I want to know your view. Thank you.
Thank you, Firdausi. Well, the internet is global in its connectivity, but it's local in its impact. Therefore, you have a point. I would be a bit careful about using imposition. I think internet is a great enabler, and we should take it. And regardless society, if we boil down the things to 3 core issues of humanity: protection of human life, protection of human dignity, and realization of human potentials, internet can help regardless cultures. It's true that obviously we are now speaking in English, not in Farsi or not in Bahasa or other languages. It's clear that, that there was a cultural influence, but I wouldn't see it as a too big problem because other cultures are flourishing. But the reason is what is my major concern is that we realize how it impacts our society. Are we happy today with it? Is Indonesian society happy with it or not? And that's important issue, not to have imposed solution from outside because somebody thought that it works well in France or UK or Switzerland or any country, Argentina. No, let's see how it works in Indonesia and accept certain common rules, but adjust it to Indonesian specific. I'm mentioning Indonesia since you are from Indonesia and I'm a big fan of the country. Adjust to the local cultural and the social needs, importance of family, importance of the religious considerations and other issues. Therefore, that's true. That is going to be a big issue. And I will just mention the ones, and with that I will close. Moral Machine MIT project asked for answer to the trolley question. You know the trolley question, whom to save, mother with a child, the business people or elderly people. In most Western society, they opted for saving mother with a child. In Asian society, especially in China, there was more balance and even twist towards elderly people. Therefore, societies are putting different values to different generations, and that was for me telling example how we have to adjust and to really keep in mind that the internet is global in its functionality, but it is local in its impact on the cultural space in specific parts of society. I realize that Farzaneh left many interests. There's always interesting comments, but I won't monopolize anymore my sort of role and listen carefully to Farzaneh. She has many interesting points to add. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Cavalia.
Thank you, Dr. Jovan.
We'll be moving on to our next speaker, as Dr. Cavalia has mentioned, to Dr. Farzaneh Badei. Dr. Badei is founder of Digital Medusa. That's an initiative which focuses on protecting the core values of our global digital space with sound governance. For the past decade, she has directed and led projects about internet and social media governance. She has also helped mobilize civil society in different forums, such as the Christchurch Call Advisory Network and the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. She has undertaken research at Yale Law School, Georgia Institute of Technology, and the Humboldt Institute for Internet and Society in Berlin. She holds a PhD in law from Hamburg University in Germany. Dr. Badi will be speaking about internet governance and geopolitics, crisis, unrest, uprisings, and social media. So quite a broad topic here. Please note that if we have time, just like the previous speaker, Dr. Badi will be taking questions directly after her presentation, as she'll be unable to attend the Q&A session at the very end. So Dr. Badi, please feel free to take the metaphorical stage.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to share this, and it's like kind of like a Google presentation. I haven't done this before, so let me know if you can see everything. Okay, and then the slideshow.
Coming through clearly.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for the invitation. And I just wanted to kind of explain a little bit. I know it's a very broad issue that, oh, it says that I've paused this screen sharing. Why? Why is this happening? Okay, so I know that it's a broad issue, but what I wanted to kind of like discuss was the role of the internet in crisis and conflict. And I was very happy to see the description of this session. And I think it is very important not to forget, because the dominant narrative nowadays is that the internet is kind of a tool to be used for malice and malicious acts, which is not true. I mean, it is true that it can be used, but it has also been used for many good efforts. So basically, what I would like to kind of, okay, so did I like resume sharing this? This is not. Okay.
No, we can only see the front, I'm afraid.
All right. So, okay. So let me just all right. Okay. So I'm gonna stop share this, and then I'm gonna start. Sorry for the distraction. I should not have tried new things. Just doing it. Okay. So, I think this is gonna work. Okay. So. Did it work?
We can see your desktop.
All right. Well, no, that's not a good thing. Okay. So let's just do it this way, and then we can. All right. Great. So one thing that I want to start from is that the internet is not just a means of communication anymore. Maybe it was 20 years ago when we had like group chats and we could talk to each other like globally in different spaces, and it was in its infancy. But now we see that access to the internet is actually access to essential services. And COVID was an unfortunate event that happened. But also it made us realize how much internet has become a part and parcel of our daily lives, and we could not have operated and functioned without the internet during COVID. And I know that there is like a huge population that does not have access to the internet, but that does not mean that does not reduce the importance of internet in our daily lives. So, and so for the role of the internet during crisis, what we need to kind of, which I think that it gets overlooked by the Western entities and countries, is that we've always been in crisis in one way or another around the world. So, the initial idea of the internet partly came out of a project that was by DARPA, which is the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. It was a research project that later on, I don't know if you know of Vint Cerf, who came up with this protocol that could like take these internet packets, like transfer them around the world. And he was a part of that project as well. And then the project evolved into something phenomenally civilian and humane. And also, but when during all this development of the internet, even early on, there was crisis and geopolitics and wars happening throughout the throughout the world. However, they managed to, I'm not going to go into details of how they managed to develop the internet globally, despite the fact that there were all these conflicts, but it is a very interesting historical study to look at it. And there are a few papers about that. If you're interested, I can send it to you. So, and also like the early engineers that were involved with developing the internet, they took into consideration these conflicts and they tried to be globally connected. So anyway, and then we go to the 2000s, and then US invades Iraq and Afghanistan, and then all these crises happening. So crisis didn't happen yesterday. Wars didn't happen like 2 years ago. We are in like constant struggle around the world. But there's one thing that we have about the internet that makes it very special, and there are like attacks on it, and that is its interconnected, global, interoperable nature. And Ferdowsi mentioned in the previous presentation that whether like, you know, internet is like kind of an, I don't want to misframe what you said, Ferdowsi, but like whether it's an imposition, cultural imposition on others. I have to say that at the infrastructure level, the internet is trying to just connect people. And there are, of course, other layers that have like a bigger impact that could be like culturally imposed. But at the infrastructure level, which I'm going to tell you what it is, the internet's value is to connect people, regardless of their race, their gender, where they are located. So how do we actually get connected globally? And I'm not saying that discriminatory practices don't exist, and there are discriminatory practices that I will mention. There are policies that have affected our access, but there are these principles that certain internet governance institutions try to uphold, and as a result, we don't have the. As a result, we don't at the moment. We have managed to keep the internet global and interconnected. And you might tell me that no, it is not, because China just walls off its citizens from the global internet. But that is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the infrastructure. It's not like certain country policy, but it's these internet governance institution policies in order to provide their services and provide the infrastructure to people. And of course, we have like terrible government policies that deprive people of that. But it is important to know that the governance institution, the internet governance institutions have tried to maintain that global access. So what are these internet governance institutions? We have something called Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. That's they call it in short ICANN, which is responsible for the coordination of allocation of domain names. Now, what are domain names? Domain names are like digitalmedusa.org or example.com, and it has a very complicated governance structure. But what is important for ICANN was to, despite the fact that it is a US-based entity, was to globally coordinate the domain, the allocation of domain names, so that you wouldn't be affected, and your access to domain names wouldn't be affected just because you are from some like country, and then the other organization, Internet Governance Organization, that we can mention are the regional internet registries. The regional internet registries, so I think Jovan also mentioned, so our devices talk to each other through IP addresses. IP is the short form for Internet Protocol. It's not intellectual property. I know there are some lawyers here. So in order for our devices to talk to each other, we need to have IP addresses. And in order for these to be global and to interoperate globally, we needed organizations that could coordinate the allocation of these IP addresses to the internet service providers, so there are 5 regional internet registries that coordinate these numbers. So now so these internet governance institutions that I mentioned, they kind of coordinate the allocation of critical properties of the internet. Why do we call them critical properties of the internet? Because if you, especially for IP addresses, if you don't have access to IP addresses, you will not have access to the internet. If your device cannot connect, so it's not like Facebook, or you just don't have access to Facebook or access to Twitter, or you can like go to other domain names. You cannot connect. So the level of, so I think it's quite important when we define critical properties of the internet to understand the level of how it affects our, the level of our presence on the internet. So, and then I was going to, so these internet governance institutions that provide this infrastructure that is important have been able to maintain the values of global, interconnected, and open and free internet so far. I mean, there have been conflicts and policy issues that I'm going to mention. And but then how did they uphold it? And I'm going to make like really short examples because I can go on and on about this forever. So basically what they have done is to focus on their mission, which is giving interconnectivity regardless of gender, nationality, and others. However, there was a problem in providing these services to sanctioned countries. And what do we mean by sanctioned countries? We mean the countries that are embargoed. And these sanctions, like economic sanctions are usually imposed on countries by other countries in order to make them behave in a certain way. For example, if they are carrying out terrorist activities, they stop them from doing that. And one of these countries where I'm from is Iran. And so Iran had a long history of conflict with the US, and it had committed human rights violations. And as a result of this historical conflict, we have a large area of policies, like sanction policies that US imposed on Iran. And then also Europe and others joined after Iran was unwilling to stop the nuclear enrichments. And but that had an effect on these sanctions had an effect on providing IP addresses. I mean, not providing, but kind of like maintaining the provision of IP addresses to the Iranians. And the problem was that like mostly private sector did not want to work with these internet governance institutions because they were dealing with sanctioned countries. And it's not only Iran, it's also Syria and you know, a bunch of other countries that their access to the internet could be potentially hampered. At the moment, it is stable, but it could be potentially hampered. So, and oh, wow, I only have 5 minutes. Okay, so let's go. Okay, so what they have done so far is to kind of try and get all waivers for sanctions and have internet carve-outs for sanctioned countries, because the internet goes beyond just electronic communication. It's essential services. So, and I have, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how social media platforms also have a role in our in these like uprising and our access to the internet. But I just gonna like briefly mention that they have not become, so social media platforms are not yet critical properties of the internet. So if you don't have access in some countries, if you don't have access to Facebook, your online presence might not be diminished to that extent, but they might have they might slowly become a big part of people's presence, especially in developing countries, for access to the internet and to essential services online. And their governance is very important as well. And I wanted to mention a few cases about Afghanistan. Unfortunately, when the withdrawal of U.S. military happened and the Taliban took over, a lot of the social media platforms did not provide that support that they could for Afghan civilians to, you know, remove their Facebook profile, which they were like prosecuted for, and that was like an outcry. And even now during online crisis, these platforms don't really have a solid process that, for example, the Iranian uprising that happened and it's still continuing, we still don't have a good way to help people there, to protect them if they're like arrested, to protect their online profiles. And I wanted to talk to you a lot about a recent Facebook oversight board, but I don't think I have time. So I'm just gonna wrap it up by just the last one. So I think that that our governance, internet governance structures are evolving. They are still providing us with the interoperable and global infrastructure, but we need to protect these essential properties by enabling people to use the internet during crisis and geopolitical conflicts, regardless of who they are and where they are, and ensure and increase trust and safety instead of just focusing on taking some content down. But now I just stop, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Badihi. I believe we have some time now for some questions and answers. Again, if the attendees want to use the Q&A function on Zoom, that would be handy. But I will also open the floor to the other panelists. You may have, no, I don't have a question, Elsie. It's up to you. If you have a question, please feel free.
Okay, Dr. Badi. Maybe this is the question that may be a continuation of your presentation. We want to know about what actually happened after the Mahzadi, what is the name? Amini case, because it sounds like there is a disconnect of information that we, at the beginning, we know that there is a demonstration and so on, there is a conflict, and then suddenly we don't get really enough information about it. So maybe from the internet governance context.
So there was the internet shutdown, exactly. The Islamic Republic decided to, because obviously authoritarian countries and dictatorships are scared when people can communicate with each other and with the world. And the internet has facilitated that quite well, and the Iranians use it really effectively. So unfortunately, we had like one of the most like the largest internet shutdown in the history of Iran's internet, and they shut down the mobile internet because people would go to uprising and put pictures up of police violence, and then but that hasn't. And so what we are trying from the outside is to tell the tech corporations and other internet actors to provide relief for people to have access to the internet. So I am like, it's a personal thing, but I wasn't able to talk to my family for a while until Microsoft decided that for like Skype, we could use the Skype to call Iran for free. And also, but then also what we need to do from the outside to help that, this is not just about Iran, like Myanmar, we have problems, like we need to help the civilians there as well, and Afghanistan. So we need to have a strategy on how the tech corporations and internet actors can help during uprising, during crisis, during conflict, the civilians. And I think that there are a few examples, like good examples of what happened after they shut down the internet in Iran. And, you know, there was also Elon Musk, who likes to say that he's the savior of the world. So he said that they're gonna provide Starlink, which is not going to happen. And I can explain that like later, but I think that there is like a two-way. The good thing about the internet is that it's a decentralized distributed network. So even if the Iranian Islamic Republic wants to shut it down completely, it can never shut it down like that. There is zero connectivity. And that is the most important aspect, that is because of those internet governance institutions and how these structures have like evolved throughout the internet development. And that's why we need to keep it like that. And of course, be more innovative with our governance structure as our societal and also technology evolves.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. And I must say you were able to elegantly cover a very, very broad subject there. So thanks again.
Thank you, Farzaneh.
I'll be moving to our next speaker, who is Mr. Thinithope Lawal. Mr. Lawal is a PhD candidate at Bond University, Australia, and he's joining us today from Australia, where I believe it's something like 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. So thank you very much for joining us at such a late time, Mr. Lawal. His research probes into the question of whether technology drives change in the legal profession by examining the continued justification for jurisdictional restrictions on the practice of law in light of emerging technologies. His other research interests include telecommunications regulation, technology in the law, and legal theory and education. Prior to taking a professional career break to embark on his PhD studies, Mr. Lawal was a manager in the Legal and Regulatory Services Department of the Nigerian Communications Commission, the independent regulator for communication services in Nigeria. Mr. Lawal is a Nigerian qualified lawyer with over 10 years post-qualification experience. He holds an LLM in Computer and Communications Law from CCLS, Queen Mary University of London. And Mr. Lawal will be speaking today on the topic of internet governance and geopolitics in Nigerian context, as you can see from the slide in front of us today. Please note that if we have time, Mr. Lawal will be taking questions directly after his presentation, as I'm sure you all appreciate that it's very late for him, and so he'll have a bit less time than the other presenters today. So Mr. Lawal, please feel free to begin.
Thank you, Jose. Good day, everyone, and I'm excited to be a part of this focus group on the discussion on internet governance. Actually, it's about 11 p.m. here in Australia, in Brisbane, Queensland. So it's just some minutes to midnight. My presentation would address the issue of internet governance and geopolitics in the Nigerian context. So just a few housekeeping. This is what my outline would look like. I will take approximately 20 minutes to give my presentation. So as with every other concept, internet governance has different definitions, right? But what is obvious is that there are some common themes that are in most definitions of internet governance. So the first is that it includes rules, right? So there are sets of rules, policies, standards, and practices that guide how the internet or the cyberspace should be used. Then there's meant to be cooperation of different stakeholders, such as governments, private sector, civil society. So this is also essential to the definition of internet governance. And it cuts across local, national, regional, and international borders. So these three characteristics are included in most definitions of internet governance. So historically, internet governance was mainly concerned with the equitable allocation of, internet identifiers or internet resources such as domain names and IP addresses, which the other speakers have obviously touched on. The ICANN was established in 1998, and it serves as a body that manages the policy and technical aspects of DNS and IP. So I'm going to be using abbreviations, DNS meaning domain name systems, and IP addresses meaning internet protocol addresses. And ICANN was very instrumental in creating awareness for internet governance. So there's obviously scope for other internet governance policy discussions to include not just IP addresses and domain names, but to also include cybersecurity, digital trade, free speech online, obviously because of ICT capabilities. And then what my presentation will be touching on, will be focusing on is geopolitics, right? Because this is also an essential discussion point when talking about IG. So I'll also be using IG and internet governance interchangeably. So it will be foolhardy to assume that existing political, socio-economic, and power structures have little or no impact on how the internet is operated, because they actually do have a lot of impact on how the internet is governed, right? So a few governments, mostly high-income countries and mega technology companies, wield extensive powers and sometimes extraterritorial powers over the internet, which could either negatively impact the economy of other countries or foster geopolitical conflict, right? And the reason why extraterritorial, the reason why they can wield such powers across borders is because of the ease with which there's cross-border data flow. And this raises a huge, concern on the role of internet governance in the context of geopolitics. So the question is, what should be the appropriate response from developing countries like Nigeria in governing the cyberspace within their territorial borders, especially in the context of geopolitics? So the internet in its current state is ubiquitous. So everyone, everywhere has need for internet, much like every other utilities like water and electricity. But of course, because of the nature of the internet, its mode of governance obviously has to be different from these other public utilities. So global internet governance is facilitated by multi-stakeholder model. I mean, most of the things that I'm touching on in my presentation, you might have probably heard one or two speakers just make mention of them, but it's the global internet governance is essentially modeled after a multi-stakeholder approach. What this approach essentially, or the ideal for this approach should be that it's a decentralized model. So by design, it should prevent one country from holding or wielding too much power or control over the internet. And it obviously is supposed to place different stakeholders on equal levels. So be it individuals, industries, civil society or government, they're supposed to operate on an equal level. And then it's supposed to allow for a community-based policy making. This is the ideal situation for a multi-stakeholder model of internet governance. However, the reality is that this approach actually makes it viable for some countries or private companies, which we all know, to seek to gain economic or political advantages by imposing or influencing control over the governance structure of the internet. So many developing countries continue to feel, marginalized in the global internet governance ecosystem. So some reasons adduced for that could be that, the same political elites drive global IG process, both, technical and policy formulations, essentially creating sort of institutionalized system of hegemony where you see that international norms are primarily benefiting the creators of those, rules. There's also the concern about how the suboptimal participation of, African countries or, developing countries at different internet governance fora, either at the ITU level or at the IGF level or at the ICANN level. And then, there are different reasons why this could be, either because of financial constraints on the part of the governments of those countries not being able to send in more representations compared to like the richer countries. There could also be reasons of lack of specialized technical expertise. So these countries might not have the requisite expertise to be able to contribute at this fora. Also, it could be that they're just not interested in the issues that are being discussed at this internet governance forum, maybe because they have a different national priority, right? And then there's also the issue of lack of regional internet policy coordination. And this obviously leads to like a limited ability to move forward a coordinated agenda at the global level. So when you see that countries within a bloc or a region are not able to agree on certain issues, of course, when they get to international fora, they would not have a common voice at those fora. So multilateral approach seems to be the default for this sort of developing countries. And what is the multilateral internet governance approach? It's meant to be a state-centric approach, so which presupposes that sovereignty of a nation state should be given top priority in internet governance. So states are given more autonomy in regulating the internet within their territorial borders. There are justifications for this that intergovernmental structures offer more sovereign equality for states rather than including like a lot of stakeholders in the governance structure. And then there's also the justification that multilateral model allows room for more democratic governance because there's like a full spectrum of participants across different countries, right? Now, how does this all situate within the geopolitical context? There's obviously power plays in the global internet governance space. Some call it West versus East, some call it global West versus global South. So the US on one part, favors multi-stakeholder model, which is openness of the internet, ability of the internet to transcend borders, while countries like China and Russia favor multilateral model, which presupposes cyber sovereignty, the rights of nations to independently determine how they want to regulate the internet. Regions like the European Union, while they align with the multi-stakeholder model, they also understand the need for government involvement, especially in terms of data sovereignty. So EU citizens should be able to have autonomy and control over their data, especially in the hands of non-EU technology companies. And then on the other spectrum, there's developing countries that they're pretty much like a ground for the global powers to expand their geopolitical agenda. So a case in point is the race for 5G dominance. So there's political tension between the US and China for who will control the global 5G infrastructure. China is deploying physical infrastructure to developing countries at an affordable price point. But apart from deploying this physical infrastructure, it is also exporting its ideological principles, that is, regarding cyber governance, it uses the Digital Silk Road Initiative to foster this ideology. So either by design or by accident, most developing countries align with cyber security. So using Nigeria as an example, over time, Nigeria has evolved different policies that advances cyber sovereignty rather than openness of the internet. So this could be seen, the first set of instances that I would use are two bills that are before the National Assembly in Nigeria. So the National Assembly in Nigeria is a legislative arm of government. It's a bicameral legislative arm. So it's made up of the House of Assembly, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. So the House of Senate introduced two bills in 2019. One is, known as the social media bill, while the other one is known as the hate speech bill. So the social media bill essentially criminalizes criticism of government. So when individuals online make statements that are likely to prejudice national security, in quotes, so it criminalizes those sort of, openness of speech online. Whilst the hate speech bill, which is a very interesting bill, it sets up a government agency to enforce its, provisions. And one of the interesting provisions of the bill is that anyone who is found guilty of hate speech is liable to life imprisonment. And if that hate speech leads to death of another person, then the guilty party will be subjected or will be sentenced to death. Of course, these two bills created a lot of discord amongst the youth and most citizenry. So whilst these two bills are yet to be passed, they have not been discontinued at the National Assembly. So there's obviously it's possible and probable that they might pass further readings and become law. And then there's the Twitter ban, which a lot of people are aware of. So between June 2021 and January 2022, the Nigerian government banned Twitter because Twitter deleted a tweet by the president of Nigeria because according to Twitter, it violated its community rules. And the government of Nigeria banned Twitter using a justification that Twitter was undermining the Nigerian corporate existence, right? So to put it in context, that ban period, for a period of 3 months, Nigeria lost so this is 200 billion naira, but in dollar terms, almost $500 million. So for the first 3 months of the ban, the economy took a huge hit, by losing like almost $500 million. And it heavily impacted, SMEs and other small businesses. There's also the instance of telecoms infrastructure being shut down due to insecurities. And between September and November of 2021, there were instances of internet shutdown in various states, so Kaduna State, Zamfara State, and then the neighboring states were also impacted. The government used the justification of insecurity to curb insecurity. But then the interesting thing is that despite these shutdowns, there still continues to be like insecurity and banditry, because obviously there are circumventing tools like satellite communications that can be used in place of, physical telecoms infrastructure on ground. And of course, there are other African countries that have told this line of imposing strict rules on governance of internet, like Tanzania introduced an annual blogger license fee. So bloggers in Tanzania will have to pay like $930 for them to get a license to blog. Uganda has introduced, social media tax. Countries like Benin Republic frequently shut down the internet. Egypt has internet censorship rules. Same thing with South Africa. So you would see these across developing countries and African countries in particular, trying to regulate the internet within their territorial borders. But then the question is, are these appropriate internet governance considerations? While it's true that every country has the right to exclusive sovereignty over their territorial borders, and the internet should not be seen as a lawless territory, it's also the case that governing any aspect of the cyberspace requires more coordination at an international level. I mean, this is obviously the case because of the nature of the internet. It's open, the infrastructure is decentralized, So because of the underlying nature of the internet, which is not designed to respect national borders, coupled with how difficult it is to enforce laws across jurisdiction, national regulators should develop policies that are not in isolation, but having regards to other stakeholders within the value chain, like private sector, civil society. Of course, national regulators, especially those from underrepresented countries and regions, should be more active and participatory at international policy-making processes at these internet governance fora, such as ICANN, the IGF, ITU, where internet governance issues are discussed. On the surface, this approach might seem simplistic, right? And it could be argued, and rightly so, that there are more complex underlying factors, as I've already highlighted in this presentation, that kind of skew in favor of more advanced countries and private companies being able to influence global internet governance policy. However, it does not necessarily suggest that countries and regions in this that are underrepresented, cannot take steps to change this narrative. If their participation continues over time in a consistent and strategic manner at this international fora, and they get feasible, their contributions are seen in more prominently, then it becomes more plausible that their influence would grow and eventually have an impact on how global internet governance policies are shaped. So for instance, China has in the past decade, steadily increased its influence at different international standard development organizations like the ISO, like the ITU. The question of whether China is utilizing these strategies for itself, its self-serving geopolitical interest, is beyond the scope of my presentation. But what I'm just trying to drive at is that when you are consistent in your contributions at this fora, your voice becomes heard. So in summary, what I know and what a lot of people agree is that geopolitical interest will always be relevant considerations during internet governance discussion. Countries cannot but put their geopolitical interest whenever they are discussing internet governance. As such, developing countries should not continue to toe this line of non-alignment or neutrality when discussions on global internet governance issues are being had, because being neutral can be seen as aligning with the geopolitical agenda, of some countries, not minding the intention behind and the outcome of such agenda. With this, I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Wonderfully timed, Mr. Lawal. Thank you very much. We have some time now for some questions, and we've actually already received a question here. I don't know if Dr. Farzaneh is still here, but I think this would be an interesting question to pose to both of you. And as we know, in internet governance, privacy is a very important right and consideration. And so this attendee has opted to exercise their right for privacy. And so it's an anonymous question. But the question is, what are the viable steps to take towards safeguarding connectivity, especially for times of unrest?
So is Dr. Fazir still here, or can I go?
Yeah, actually, I am here.
Would you like me to repeat the question, or is it okay?
No. I read the question. Sorry, I have to be in listening mode because other meetings are going on, but I just thought because I also wanted to listen to other presentation. So this is a very good question. And we have been, so there are two sides of it. One is to maintain and help people to connect to the internet in the first place. And then the other is that preserve that connectivity and also let them have access to other essential services. So one of the ways that, so unfortunately at the infrastructure level, because we are like working with the internet service providers, local internet service providers, and they are the primary providers of access to the infrastructure. When the government shut down those ISPs, then there is little we can do. But what can be done, especially in countries that you have a very centralized, like the telco is has a centralized data center and obliges all the private ISPs to, and all the data go through their data centers. However, there is still hope, but one thing that we can do is to focus and put pressure on these countries to kind of like allow for more decentralized and private ISPs that can't be shut down. And this might be like an interesting concept for the lawyers here. One of the ideas was that my colleague Patricia Vargas has come up with, which is like wishful thinking, but we think that it's pretty cool. It's to kind of give them immunity in times of uprising and conflict and war, in order so that no nation, no government can touch them. But also there are alternatives to, and as I mentioned, a complete shutdown of the internet is not possible. So when we have those weak, so some of these network operators try to work with the outside network operators to bring connectivity by kind of like having like moving from one place to another. And it is very important to keep those communication channels open when something like this happens. And another side of it, and I went on and on about this, I'm sorry, but another side of it is to provide, maybe for a period of time, free services to the people that are in crisis, and not to like charge them or want them to give us like their credit card information. I don't know if you know about like Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is in like the government is in crisis now, and unfortunately they couldn't pay for their cloud services. Cloud services to be connected to the internet. So that kind of hampered their access. So this is another way of providing them with some relief to be connected and remain connected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tammy, please go ahead.
I'm just going to add to what Dr. Fazil said. And she's right in saying that it behoves on government, and you can't. The most or the best that can be done is to let governments know the impact, especially the negative impact of shutting down the internet during sort of civil unrest, because the reality is that the internet cannot be shut down in its entirety. So as I said in my presentation, when the internet was shut down in some states in Nigeria, there were other circumventing tools I mean, because most countries have not just one single gateway. Of course, there are some countries like China that operate like a single gateway where when you shut that gateway, then, you know, you essentially shut down terrestrial internet, not satellite internet. But it's built on countries to understand the negative implication of having internet shutdowns, right? And it's easier said than done, because a country like Nigeria has laws embedded that gives the government the authority to request ISPs to shut down the internet. And there's always that omnibus clause of national security. So this obviously something in international parlance that keeps getting interpreted in different ways, right? But I think it's more at the national level for implementation, and then at the international level for like influence on, you know, how to ensure that national countries understand the negative ramification of shutting down the internet.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, both of you. I have to say that was a very insightful question. So I'm happy that we can have both of you opine on it. We'll be moving forward. So thank you very much, Mr. Lawal, to our fourth speaker, who is Mr. Firdausi Firdaus, who needs little introduction, but nonetheless. Mr. Firdaus, he is an alumnus of CCLS with an LLM in Computer and Communications Law. As many of you have noticed, there's a pattern here. Currently, Mr. Firdaus is a PhD student and researcher in ICT law at the University of Barcelona. Before his PhD studies began, Mr. Firdausi was a lecturer in information communications technology law at UNPAD Indonesia, including cyber law, media law, telecommunications law, and case study on law and technology and e-commerce law. Mr. Firdaus was part of a small group of undergrads to be the first generation to pursue the law and technology undergraduate program at the UNPAD Indonesia Faculty of Law. And he was also involved in information and technology organizations such as MASTEL, ISOC, ICT, LSA, and currently acts as the co-lead for the Indonesian chapter of CCLS. Mr. Firdaus will be speaking about the role of internet governance in tackling geopolitical conflicts, economic crisis, energy crisis, and climate change from a Southeast Asian Association of Southeast Asian Nations and Indonesian perspective. So another very broad topic. And Mr. Firdaus, I'll pass the metaphorical microphone to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear my voice, Mr. Moderator? We'll see.
All good, Elsie.
Okay. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Thank you for having me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May the blessing from God and guidance for all of us who are here. The title of this event is very broad. Yeah. The slide that I make also looks like a handout rather than slides, but I will cherry pick. So basically, I will try to approach this issue from less infrastructural way, but also trying to focus also in more regional perspective, because it's kind of like similar interests with the internet governance itself, where I think it's like the nature of the internet, where it's borderless. So welcome to Southeast Asia region, where it consists of 11, 10 is already part of the regional institution, ASEAN. That's how we usually know. It's kind of European Union, but in our Southeast Asia region, but have also different character on how to operate compared to European Union. Yeah. Well, in one way is good, another way is also become deficiencies for many things. Okay. Next. So we are subcontinent of Asia, but actually have larger population compared to European Union or North America. And you can see from here how the mobile subscription and smartphone user is very big. Yeah, it's bigger in population. Yeah, start from Indonesia, who have 268. Yeah, this is like the data from 2 years ago. But in no time, I think the next 3 years will be reaching 300 million. So the mobile subscription now is already 355. So, and then next Philippines, over 100, then Vietnam, close to 100, and then Thailand. Okay. So what is the meaning of this? It means that the more people connect to the internet, the more the impact the internet that everybody will have, not only as a country, as an institution, as a company, but also individually or even to our soul. Yeah. As we already know from many from the previous speakers that talking very sophisticated technically, in our ASEAN region, yeah, ASEAN have a purpose to maintain peaceful economic growth, accelerate economic growth, and collaboration. This is also, I think, based on our historical, we share a historical set where some of us, or even many of us, used to be colonized by foreign countries, and we're still at the stage of developing economy, most of us, yeah, and we definitely have different culture, even compared with the country who are maybe next to our region, for example, like East Asia part, China or Japan, Taiwan and Korea, for example, yeah, let alone maybe with Europe or with America. So there are many interests that why we established this region. The typical problem of internet governance on what should be tackled in Southeast Asia is about the first one is digital divide. Yeah, because the terrain, the geographical location of Southeast Asia is not one land like in Europe or like in North America, but it's scatterbrained, where many of us, especially my country, where the most archipelagus country in the world, we have 15,000 or more, I think, 15,000 islands from the size of myself until the size of a country, where the length is like, for example, from the west part of Aceh to the east part of Indonesia in West Papua is kind of the same, like when you're from Ireland to Ukraine. Yeah, so you can imagine that. So the other challenge, of course, safety. Yeah, there are more people, and the more people use the internet, it's like when I make the analogy, it's like Indonesia expression is like when there is a sugar, there is an ants. So this is what happened. Yeah, the more people, internet is already like a sugar. So it invites lots of people, it invites a lot of ants, and not everybody have a good intention. Yeah, so this is what happened. Then cybersecurity and cybercrime is increasing in quality and quantity. And because the nature of ASEAN is not like European Union, where we can force the member state to create a law and so on and so forth, including in ICT law field, yeah, there is a lack of inadequate harmonization of ICT law and policy in our region. For example, there are no uniformity in privacy and data protection law. Yeah, it's still like a utopia or like a dream to have a GDPR version in Southeast Asia. Yeah. Also, inadequate digital literacy and critical thinking, because most of us are from developing economy, so developing countries. So it means that providing even the basic is not always as easy as developed country. Yeah, and democracy index is very varied. The level of democracy in from 10, 11 countries in Southeast Asia, not every country is quite democratic. Yeah. Some are very free, some are sometimes yes, sometimes not. Yeah, and also now recently, I think not just recently because what happened in Ukraine and Russia, but I think in these past few years, or even before that, yeah, since the Cold War, that's also probably the reason why we established ASEAN too. One of the reason is because we don't want to be dragged on the interests of outside of the region that maybe will make us become a victim or become a puppet. Yeah, so this is why ASEAN now, since the first time we established, has always tried to maintain the peaceful and togetherness, even when we have, for example, now having difficulties on how to deal with what happened in Myanmar. But because our principle is to respect the sovereignty of each member state, then there is a good and bad in that too. Yeah. in geopolitical conflicts, because in Indonesia and other Southeast Asia are actually have very good potential because of bonus demographic that we are enjoying in the next generation, or even since this generation. We need to maintain that we are not being controlled or being influenced too much by the interests outside of our region. Yeah. So, and that's is something that can be influenced, yeah, via the internet itself. Yeah. I will borrow a bit from the policy, from the non-law studies. It's from media studies. Yeah. Right. So from communication media studies, yeah, privacy management and theory, yeah, people, since they use internet, have become difficulties to maintain which one is private and public information they should share, which resulting will endanger them, yeah, not only feeling creepy, but also it might make them feel less secure in the real world, yeah, and also maybe resulting them will lose their freedom of expression and so on, maybe because they have received threatened and so on and so forth, yeah. And also control the narrative. This is why sometimes when the government panic, the internet shutdown is working, or some government or is some country implemented into splinternet, yeah. This is something that because the control of the narrative, it can be done the internet, yeah. Whether it can be done by some of groups of countries, or even the politician that want to seek the power, or even the foreign powers that we don't know, yeah. Because the internet are just so borderless, yeah. So definitely the approach of how to present the governance is not something you can only see it from one or two disciplinary, yeah. Because, and also as I asked in the first beginning of the first speaker said, it's about the culture imperialism, because somehow the internet, because of how it's being developed, is in particular in a certain society, it has an effect whether we want to agree or not agree, whether there is benefit. Of course, there is benefit without doubt. There is also a disadvantage of it. Yeah, there is an extinction, removing the local culture, because a country is not only defined by the economy. It's not only defined by how populous or how big is the territory, but also by how strong they maintain their national identity. Doesn't mean they don't accept the foreign, because what they get from the outside is not always bad, but what they get from the outside is not always good either. Yeah. And from the media studies, there is social cognitive theory, there are priming, cultivation theory, and setting agenda. This is kind of the thing on how this media theory can shape how people think about something, about issue, how to respond what happened in their surround, even including what happened in other part of the world. For example, during the war in Ukraine, it's kind of divisive on what happened in Indonesia. Some people pro-Russia, some people pro-Ukraine, and but it's not nothing new for me because it's happened before. Yeah. And also, I think it's also down to disinformation, misinformation, and fake news, where they have different in this term. Yeah. And also, it's influenced by political construction, echo chamber, confirmation bias. Again, I borrow this from media studies. Yeah. And also, because of that reason, when the internet become mismanagement, especially the effect, the uprising is becoming reality, people tend to make internet shutdown, or if they are too preventive, like the government is too authoritative, they might make the splinternet. Splinternet, what is in splinternet? Splinternet is the opposite concept of the internet that we know, open and secure. We can see, for example, in social media, we can access Facebook in this country, but we cannot access in other country. Yeah, so that's the example. Without that, the security, like when we live in real life, if we are not secure, how do we want to use the internet properly for any purpose, for commercial, non-commercial, for education, and so on and so forth. And this will get worse if it's not being tackled. Yeah. Economy in our region, digital economy in our region is very huge. Yeah. there are examples, for example, like Uber or Gojek is one of the few decacorn in our region that can even not only compete, even beat the foreign big tech. So Gojek and then, for example, Gojek and Grab, they beat Uber. I think in my country, even they kick Uber from Indonesia, and I think also in other Southeast Asia. So it is also one of our proud moment where we also can, that digital economy can also level the playing field. Yeah, but this is also means that give a lot of homework, because this is not actually already spread, because even the digital economy already become popular in this past 5, maybe almost 10 years, for example, in our region. But the reality is the wealth distribution is still need to be distributed more properly. So maybe the digital economy is still not working as we want. Yeah. Yet, even though it's still not distribution very well, actually it already have an impact on our climate change. Yeah, because the energy that we use to access the internet, whether for accessing for individual purpose, for the activity, or even for the economic, it has actually contributed more carbon dioxide, because the internet that we use, yeah, it creates carbon footprint, and this is probably important. How does the internet produce CO2? Yeah, it's from data center. Anything data that we save on email, on cloud, yeah, that's required data center. Yeah, and how the energy we use for using the internet? That people say electricity, and where is the main source of electricity? It might be from what we always heard, that it's bad for our climate change, or it's from coal, from oil, natural gas, petroleum. Yeah. So basically, we are not the exception of people that contribute to the destroying the world in the process. Yeah. Although we would at the moment still not as dangerous as maybe when we use the fossil fuel for transport. Yeah. But still, the trend to be increased is just getting higher as we are more connected with the internet. Yeah, we are more connected with the internet. There is 5G, and many things now can be done by digitally. Yeah, so this is, for example, on the table. When YouTube 1 billion hours watch, yeah, daily, it's equal with 6 billion grams, 6 grams CO2 per hour, which means it's equal driving to the moon 62 times. Yeah, this is the example. Email that we use, 306 billion emails sent, received, analyzed daily, and it's contain 1.2 trillion grams. Yeah, or driving to the moon 12,000 times. Yeah, because please remember, it's not only us, 1% or maybe one country. It is 200 countries or more. Yeah, although at the moment, based on what I hear, is still only a half of the population of the world that's connected to the internet. Yeah. Again, people with the country with a big population or big economy have the tendency to be the problems here. Like, for example, US and China with big economy, big population, of course. Indonesia maybe not really that big. We still G20, not G7, so maybe just contribute 1.4% because of our internet user, but because our population is populous, it's contribute. Yeah. So, what is the role of internet governance to combat climate change? It's related with how we manage the energy sector. Yeah. It's not about the internet can create energy, because that's the first time when I study, I thought, well, internet can create energy. No, it's still not happening, yeah, unfortunately, because actually the role of the internet in the energy sector is how to make it efficient, yeah, how to make it efficient, how internet is being used more productive, efficient, and so that we consume less. We produce less carbon dioxide. Yeah, so we contribute less with the climate change. Yeah, and I believe this should be implemented in every places around the world, especially those with the high internet penetration and then high economy and high population. Yeah, better be safe rather than sorry later, because as we all know now, we still haven't got any replacement of our beloved Earth, and no planets in our solar system that can resemble with our characteristic. So there are plenty of technology that already can be used in for internet sector. For example, automation. Yeah, it's contribute. Blockchain. This may contribute because blockchain maybe it's consuming less, but when you use Bitcoin, it actually consumes more energy. That's why the competitor Ethereum lately, I forgot the details, but they introduced new system that can make the consumption of the energy will be less. Yeah, so maybe it's a way to compete with Bitcoin. Yeah, we'll see. And then Internet of Things. This is what about, I think this is the core point of how Internet of Energy. Internet of Energy is part of Internet of Things. Yeah, what is Internet of Things? Internet of Things is basically is emerging technology that use the internet and aims to provide connectivity between physical device and things. It can be used for individually at homes. Yeah, it can be usually for industrial internet. Yeah, basically anything that you can connect with the internet in your daily lives. Internet of Things. That's why people also call it Internet of Everything. Yeah, and that's also include Internet of Energy. IOE, yeah. The scheme and the picture, how Internet of Energy is connecting, yeah, is the technology that collect data and manage operation at many points, yeah, in the power grid infrastructure. The result is the efficiency of the energy consumption, yeah, whether it's for residential, commercial, industrial buildings, plant, and so on and so forth. What is the challenge of, so the 4 pillars, maybe this is important. The 4 pillars of Internet Energy is people, data, things, and process, yeah. So, and this is also where the issue will develop in the future, because at the moment, Internet Energy IS surround in Indonesia ministry, maybe also limited because of the time. I cannot find any plan yet, yeah, and I think this is something that actually maybe need to work out in the future. When you say internet governance, probably you need to also connect with another concept of governance. For example, climate governance, data governance, yeah, cybersecurity governance. Everything have governance, even AI governance. Yeah, so that implementation concept, it should be interconnected to some extent, because we are living in the convergence era. So, but what is the challenge of IoT? Is the challenge is kind of the same like the challenge of IoT, yeah? So there's a problem with the security, yeah? There is a problem with the standard, yeah? Creating a standard is already difficult within one country in the region, and it's global even more difficult. Yeah, so this is another challenge. In our region, because when we are talking about Internet of Things, we're talking about smart city, because that's what empower smart city, one of it. Yeah, in our region, we have established smart cities network ASEAN. Yeah, where there are 26 pilot test cities that. For example, from across ASEAN, Southeast Asia country, yeah, city from Southeast Asia country, including Jakarta, for example, Bangkok, I can find this, Manila, for example.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Asi, but I'm afraid we're at time. You may want to wrap up your presentation.
Okay, almost finished. So let's go to the conclusion. Yeah, so the conclusion is, given the nature of internet governance is such a cross-sectoral issue, yeah, we cannot only see it only from merely infrastructure anymore, and it was just getting bigger and more complicated before, yeah. So it is interesting to see the future on how internet governance, data governance, cybersecurity governance, and climate governance will develop in theory, policy, and implementation, yeah, and also it is important for us to realize again that the concept of national interest cannot be like when you live in the era before Industrial Revolution, because what happened in our country or our region might have an effect in other regions. We cannot be selfish. Like, we are protecting our national interests. We are protecting our country interests. And maybe if your leader or a government are corrupt, you are just being manipulated, like what happened lately. I will not mention the country, but I think everybody knows what happened. Yeah, and it's amazing how the media studies that I said in the presentation previously, that it can really change or brainwash people to do that. We think that, yeah, but he or she hold master degree and so on and so forth. So I think to close this, let's hope that with the advancement technology, we require also more maturity and wise, because the great power comes with great responsibility. It is meaningful in many ways for an individual, for a group, for a country, and then for us, humanity. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
More in question. Thank you.
And very pertinent final messages there. Our final speaker is Dr. Zezen Kama Ishik. As a brief introduction, Dr. Ishik is an alumna of the School of Oriental and African Studies FDPS program, and also an alumna of CCLS Queen Mary University of London with an LLM in Human Rights, where she also acted as the Turkish Alumni Ambassador between the years 2013 and 2022. She's currently an assistant professor at Istanbul Medeniyet University Faculty of Law in the Department of Constitutional Law. And in 2019, she was a visiting researcher at University of Paris 1 Panthéon-Sorbonne. During the same year, she also completed her PhD at Marmara University in Istanbul, Department of Public Law. Her published PhD thesis is a constitutional overview of European data protection law, and her main research areas are constitutional law, human rights law, and their intersections with digitization, privacy and data protection as a human right. She'll be speaking about internet governance, the internet governance regime in Turkey, international and national approaches. So Dr. Kama Ishik, I'll hand over to you, and Elsie, you may need to stop sharing your screen as well to enable Dr. Kama Ishik to be able to share her screen.
Thank you, Jose. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude by thanking all the people who contribute to the success of this event. I am the last speaker of the day, and I know it's a bit tiring. I promise to make it as short as possible. Today, my headline is Internet Governance Regime in Turkey, International and National Approaches. As a constitutionalist, I would like to more focus on geopolitical role and also basic human rights and freedoms. First of all, I would like to show Turkey's approach on the internet governance in a global scale and also in a national scale. I would like to share both approaches, and it is quite different from each other. Whatever the circumstances, Turkey's position on internet governance is crystal clear. I'll discuss the country's global perspective on this problem. However, this view of Turkey does not entirely align with national internet policy. First of all, I have to start by saying that Turkey is seen as one of the important countries in the internet ecosystem. Former CEO of ICANN, Fatih Çağday, stated that Turkey stands in the middle of different internet governance approaches along with countries such as Brazil, Germany, and South Korea. Also, it has an influence in its geography. As known, ICANN opened a center in Istanbul. Even this is an important sign in terms of showing the importance of Turkey in terms of the internet governance. As I said, it is necessary to analyze Turkey and internet governance by dividing into two. One of is national understanding and practice. The other is international understanding and practice. Before detailing the understanding of the internet governance at the international level, I need to briefly mention the institutions that can be considered as internet governance and cybersecurity actors in Turkey. First of all, the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure is the main institution in Turkey for making policies on information and communication technologies and national cybersecurity in Turkey. The Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure was given the authority to prepare national cybersecurity policies, strategies, action plans by the Council of Ministers in 2012. And second actor is the Information and Communication Technologies Authority. We call it in Turkish BTK. The BTK is the main regulatory institution in cyberspace and the electronic communication sector. The BTK was established as a department under the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure in 2008. Also, the BTK tasks are authorizing, inspecting, resolving disputes, protecting consumer rights, regulating competition in the sector, issuing technical resolutions, and so on. And third actor is the Communication and Telecommunication Presidency in Turkey, was founded in 2005. And it is a department under the BTK responsible for surveillance and interceptions of communication in Turkey. The TIP, we call it, the Telecommunication and Communication Presidency. The TIP's duties were broadened in scope by Internet Law numbered 5651 on the regulation of publication on the Internet and suppression of crimes committed by means of such publication in 2007. It monitors and regulates online content, service providers, access providers, and public internet access providers. And this institution, the TIP, had always been a controversial institution, lying at the center of the freedom of access versus censorship and surveillance versus privacy. And it is interesting, it was shut down after the coup attempt in 2016 due to suspicions of some terrorist activities. And after that, the BTK was given all of the TIP's responsibilities. Now BTK is the Information and Communication Technologies Authority is authorized to take any necessary measure to uphold the national security and public order, prevent crime, protect public health and public morals, or protect the rights and freedoms. And also it authorized to inform operators, access providers, data centers, hosting providers, and content providers of these measures by implementing government orders within just 2 hours. As seen in this framework, especially BTK emerged as a dominant institution. Also, Article 14 of the Internet Domain Names Regulation on the duties of the BTK stipulates that these institutions will carry out the necessary work with organizations such as ICANN, such as RIPENCC and CENTR. In addition to its various national duties, it has also international duties. The World Summit on the Information Society, WSIS, has enabled Turkey to be involved in international internet governance discussions. Within the scope of WSIS preparations, a national coordination board was established under the coordination of these BTK, and the World Summit on the Information Society preparations were carried out in a wide framework. It includes stakeholders from private sectors and civil society, and 6 working groups were formed. One of the groups is the working group on the development of the master framework, which also includes ICANN-related issues. In both summits, Turkey participated extensively at ministerial level and with representatives of the private sector and civil society. With these actors and international works, Turkey advocated that international internet governance should be multilateral, legitimate, transparent, accountable, and participatory, with a contribution to the Working Group on Internet Governance, WGIG, within the scope of the World Summit on Information Society. And also it was pointed out that no state or no group of states should be in a privileged position regarding international internet governance. According to this understanding, if a new structure for the internet resources is established, it should be under the umbrella of the UN, and equal participation of all governments should be ensured. This is Turkey's national approach on international internet governance. And with this understanding, the importance of the management of the internet by an international legitimized structure was highlighted at the second preparation meeting held in Geneva within the scope of the Tunisia summit preparations. In the opinion presented by Turkey at the third preparation meeting, it was also suggested that an evolving approach should be preferred instead of sudden changes by drawing attention to the World Summit on the Information Society process. And this process should not adversely affect the stability, security, and continuity of the internet. Although this is how Turkey looks at the internet governance on the international scale, its attitude at the national level is quite different. Over the last decade, Turkish authorities have extended their power to control the flow of information and regulate speech on the internet. Especially after the Arab Spring, in Turkey, there were the Gezi protest, is a kind of Arab Spring movement. The Gezi protest movement in June 2013, it has had a profound impact on the internet, especially Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. And after these protests, Turkish law enforcement agencies in national level started to closely monitor the impact of the political use of network technologies on social mobilizations. Turkey's first internet law, numbered 5651, entitled Regulation of Publications on Internet and Suppression of Crimes committed by means of such publications, was approved in May 2007, and its objective are protecting families and minors. This law set forth the criteria for blocking websites and further defined the responsibilities of content providers, hosting companies, mass use providers, and internet service providers. And it also designed the roles and obligations of the internet actors and designed to monitor online content and direct hosting and access providers. I'll briefly mention two articles of this law because it is directly related to national internet governance approach of Turkey. Article 8 of the law numbered 56 and 51 has created 7 categorical crimes for which a website may be blocked: incitement to suicide, facilitation of the use of narcotics, child pornography, obscenity, prostitution, etc. These articles also authorize the TIP, Telecommunication and Communication Presidency, to combat such crimes. According to this article, the TIP was authorized to block access if the content provider or the hosting provider resided outside of Turkey. After receiving the order, the ISPs were required to execute blocking decision within just only 24 hours. Failing to do so would be punishable with imprisonment from 6 months up to 2 years. As a result, approximately 3,700 websites were blocked between 2007 and 2009. After this law, by May 2009, there were approximately 82,000 complaints, and courts and prosecutors had issued 2,600 orders to ban websites. And as you can see easily, it is quite significant increase. Just for 1 month, 80,000 complaints, and courts and prosecutors had issued 2,600 orders to ban websites. Due to the restrictions of internet access, Reporters Without Borders added Turkey to the list of countries under surveillance. And also the Association of Internet Technologies filed a complaint to the Turkish authorities about website blocking by accusing them by violating freedom of expression to the ECHR, European Court of Human Rights. And the European Court of Human Rights ruled that roughly the Turkish internet law was against the European Convention on Human Rights. YouTube remained notoriously inaccessible between 2008 and 2009. Twitter became inaccessible for 13 days in 2014. The ban was lifted when the Constitutional Court ruled the ban was illegal, but this was a local elections period and the Constitutional Court's decision after the elections. So it is not a quite efficient, we can say. Governmental requests for the removal of the content, both international social media platforms and on popular Turkish websites are also widespread. For instance, on March 2014, Twitter declared that it had started to use country withheld content tool for the first time in Turkey. In the first half of 2018, the number of legal demands made by Turkey doubled, making up roughly 7% of the total legal requests from Twitter internationally. Also, in this state, Twitter complied with 80% of Turkey's removal requests. And also, Article 9 of the aforementioned law governs the access blocking procedure in cases of violations of personal rights. And from the constitutionalist perspective, individual applications to the Turkish Constitutional Court are constantly filed because of the Article 9, because Article 9 infringes on freedom of expression. It must be said that Turkish Constitution guarantees freedom of communication, thought, and opinion expression and dissemination of thought as well as press. This is because Turkish Constitutional Court examined individual applications, and it recently changed its case law on Article 9 of this internet law by using the pilot judgment procedure, and it ruled that the violation of freedom of expression is due to the law itself in October 2021. Today, there are almost 334 cases related just this article before the Constitutional Court. And since 2012, Turkish authorities have used existing laws such as penal code, anti-terror law in the online environment to penalize online content that fell outside of the internet law. In summary, while Turkey's domestic internet policy prioritizing digital sovereignty and information security over privacy and internet freedoms, Turkey advocates that international internet governance should be multilateral, legitimate, transparent, accountable, and participatory. It is obvious that these domestic practices damage the cyberspace, not only hinders Turkey's objective of sustaining a secure and resilient cyberspace ecosystem, but also, from my point of view, but also it detached Turkey from the Euro-Atlantic Alliance, as known, Turkey's security and economic interests are still most strongly linked with the Euro-Atlantic Alliance. And despite Turkey's official approach on multilateralism and its compliance with the emerging norms in the Euro-Atlantic Alliance concerning internet governance, Turkey's domestic internet policy is shaped by the rise of information controls and increasing efforts to establish digital sovereignty to national space. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience and have a good day. I would like to make it as short as possible, and thank you for all listening.
Thank you very much, Sezen. And I have to say, personally, as a commercial lawyer who's advised in this area, the topics which you've raised today have been challenging, not just on a human rights level, but I think even on a commercial level. You know, you've pointed out companies like Twitter face a multitude of challenges ad hoc in Turkey. So luckily, we actually have 5 minutes now for questions and answers. I'll provide the panelists, the remaining panelists, an opportunity to ask questions to each other if they have any, and the attendees, if you have any questions, then please feel free to use the Q&A tool on Zoom. So Elsie, Sezen, if you have any questions on the topic we've been discussing at the moment, please feel free to go ahead and ask.
Sezen, it's so amazing, the presentation, that I think kind of like disabled, but I'm asking about how indirect, because Turkey kind of have a quite a role in trying to mediate between the Ukraine and Russia. So how actually the political media, social media in Turkey, is there any foreign country or even within the Turkey that actually have interest? It's more benefit to side with Russia or with Ukraine. So maybe there is a bit conflict, divisive. I say to you that in Indonesia, there is a kind of divisive, but that's not new in Indonesia. For other issue, it might also happen. Now maybe it's the issue moving to another in Indonesia, but in the past, when we just begin, it's kind of hot when you see on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere else, just pro-Russia, pro-Ukraine. Okay, we are so far away, but okay, so we are so connected, I guess. So I was wondering if Indonesia is like that, then Turkey, where your president is quite very active to mediate between Ukraine and Russia. I was wondering what happened in Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you, Osi, for the question. Actually, I can just answer this question as an observer. To be honest, as you said, in terms of the governmental level, Turkey is trying to stay between these two countries and trying to keep the balance, because in terms of energy, we have to really connection with Russia. But in terms of the humanity issue in this war, we are trying to stand with the Ukraine. But in terms of the political media, actually, they are the same. They are trying to keep balance with these two countries. Generally, media also, not just social media, also political media, newspapers and TV programs are also trying to keep balance. And in terms of humanity, for instance, if you are looking on the Instagram or Twitter or YouTube, from the point of Turkish people, they are more strongly linked between Ukraine. But in terms of the media, classical media, old school media, I mean, they're sometimes pro-Russian, sometimes pro-Ukrainian, but generally Ukrainian part is more, let's say, more, they are with Ukrainians generally. But as I told you, in terms of the especially energy sector, we are strongly linked with Russia, unfortunately. So sometimes it has kind of bad effects, to be honest.
Thank you, Sezen.
If we have no further questions, then I'll once again thank our panelists today, our speakers. Thank you very much, Sezen. Thank you very much, Elsie. It's been a very fascinating afternoon or evening. And I'll pass on to Pajari for our final closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Jose. I would say it was such an enlightening 2 hours, and not only for me, and I think for our attendees as well. And this will be great if the Queen's Mary to to host these sessions for the whole event. And on behalf of the Center for Commercial Law Studies, or CCLS, of Queen Mary University of London, I would like to say thank you very much for everybody today. Thank you to Jose, you are such a wonderful moderators. Thank you to our all speakers. Even Temi had to leave due to the time difference, but I would say that the insightful information and everything he's been sharing with us is quite very interesting, and to see the next move to all the regions, like either Nigeria or what's going to happen in ASEAN or Indonesia, or the situation that the Dr. Seysen just talked earlier about things, about the internet situations in Turkey is very fascinating. And I can't wait to see how this thing going to roll and affect all of us in the geopolitics way. So I think we quite pass a lot of times, but I think it's worth it anyway. So thank you very much. And I hope from this event, we can learn so many things. So I'm gonna have to end the session for today. Goodbye, good night, everyone. So stay safe. Bye-bye, thank you so much. And for anyone who wants the slide, the presentations from all our speakers, Ossie, could you please type your email on the chat box so the attendees could get it as well? Right, so he just texted that on the chat box. So if any attendees wants to ask for the presentations for today, please contact Tufodo Ossie. So good night, everyone, and goodbye, everyone. Bye.